70% of U.S. households' wealth is wrapped up in home equity, according to Pew Research. Maybe you know someone who bought an investment property in the town where their kid went to college. Wouldn't it be awesome to turn the tax-free growth in a 529 plan into long-term wealth for your family? Today, we'll discuss the rules of withdrawing from a 529 plan and what that means for using a 529 plan to pay your mortgage. And stick around till the end when I'll give you my take on this 529 hack. If your social media feed looks anything like mine, you've probably been bombarded by the real estate bros telling you how you need to take all of your money and invest it in real estate to get rich quick and avoid taxes. If you're watching this video, it's probably a safe bet that you're also trying to figure out this whole college funding thing and may have heard that 529 plans are great savings options for paying for college. So the question is, can I use my 529 plan to pay for my mortgage? And if I can, does it make any sense? First, let's start off with a brief overview of what a 529 plan is and what it can be used for. 529 plan is a tax-advantaged account meant to help and encourage families to save towards future education costs. When you invest money into a 529 plan, it gets to grow tax-free, and then it gets withdrawn tax-free for the use towards qualified education expenses. Qualified expenses are things like tuition, fees, books, room and board, and a few other things. But for today, the one that we care about the most is the room and board. If you withdraw funds to pay for a qualified expense, including your own board, the money comes out tax-free. But if you pull the money out for something that's not a qualifying expense, the growth on those funds is taxed at ordinary income tax rate plus a 10% penalty. When it comes to room and board, there's a couple key criteria that you need to keep in mind. First, the student must be enrolled at least half time. That includes summer semester. Next, each college has a specific capped limit on how much can count towards qualified education expenses. You can find this in the school's cost of attendance numbers. Any distributions above that limit are considered non-qualifying distributions. Now that we've set the ground rules, there are really three different options that you have to try to use a 529 plan to pay for your mortgage. We'll start with the most direct and obvious method. That's where you pull the money from your 529 plan and then use that to pay for your mortgage. And that is you simply take the money directly out of your child's 529 plan and pay for the mortgage while they're living at the house. Simple, right? The problem with this is that the funds in a 529 account are specifically for the beneficiary, the child, not for the parents. Qualified expenses like room and board must be incurred by the student while attending an educational institution. Since the parent borrowed the mortgage, it would not qualify as a qualifying education expense. Scenario 2. What if the student were to buy the house, then use the 529 plan to make the mortgage payments? If the loan is in their name, the student is the one incurring the expense. Easy enough in theory. Never mind the challenges of the student being able to actually buy a house or get a loan in their own name. Even if somehow the student were able to buy a house, the mortgage is a payment on a loan, not an education expense. And that's before we start considering about the impact on need-based financial aid of the student owning an asset like a house. A student does not get to exclude assets like houses from their FAFSA, unlike parents. Then there's the IRS restriction on claiming the same expense for two different tax breaks. You wouldn't get to pull the money out of a 529 plan tax-free and then use it to pay the mortgage and get to deduct the mortgage interest from your taxes. You simply can't have your cake and eat it too. By the way, that sounds like a really dumb saying. So if you know where that's from, leave a comment down below. Okay, so the parent can't use the funds directly to pay for the mortgage by just pulling the money out and using it to pay the mortgage. And the student can't use it to pay the mortgage, even if the mortgage is in their name, because then they're paying a mortgage on a loan, not actually paying for an educational expense. So neither of those situations will qualify. But what if the parent was to charge the student rent? Then the parent's still the one with the mortgage. So the loan is still in their name. And it's the student paying the rent, which is incurred as an education expense. So therefore, wouldn't that count as a qualified education expense and not get taxed on the way out of the 529 plan? Yes, it would, but with some specific requirements. Number one, the rent would need to be based on the fair market value. So you couldn't go just charging your student undervalue or overvalue. Number two, you would need to make sure that you comply with some pretty complex tax laws regarding renting property to rent this. Number three, you would need to use a formal written lease agreement to make sure that everything's legal and documented. And number four, the student would need to pay rent year round. This would mean that if the student is not at least enrolled half time during the summer, they would still need to pay rent. And the parent would not be able to waive the rent for the summer or help supplement the child's income, as the net amount would be less than the fair market value. So executing this strategy is going to take a lot of work, and you're going to need to coordinate with both the tax professional and the college financial expert. Now the big drum roll. What do I think? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Absolutely not. Even if you did all the stuff that we just talked about correctly, the rental income still counts as income for the parents, and they would have to claim it on their income tax returns and then pay federal income tax on it. And that was the whole point, was trying to get around having to pay federal income tax on it. Now, for some tips that actually save families on the cost of college, check out some of our other videos